Here's what the website doesn't tell you about living on campus at Tech.
I like living in Madison McCord because of the community it provides and the friendly environment.
I like living in the res halls because they're really close to the UC and the library, which makes it easy to stay involved on campus.
Reason I like living in Browning is because my roommate quickly became one of my best friends, completely random, didn't know each other before, and took us not even a day of knowing each other, and we became like super best friends. RA is also super fun to be around. He has all kinds of fun stuff for us to do. And food is relatively close. We have Chick-fil-A like 3 minutes away from us.
I like living in the res halls because it creates a built-in community where you're surrounded by people going through the same thing as you, and it's easy to make friends.
One thing I like about living in the residential halls is the Tech Wars, which is a competitive event throughout all the residential halls where we play different games. It was just a great way to get to know people when I first got here.
One of the reasons that I enjoy living on campus specifically is that I'm right there. There's a lot of stuff that happens on campus that is very nice to just be able to walk right over to. Like when I'm wanting to get to my 8 a.m.s really quickly, I can sleep in a little bit extra, and I think living on campus allows for that. There's also a lot you can do like to make your space personable. You can decorate, you can find your perfect roommate. And I really just think that living on campus, specifically at Tech, has just been really good.
Friends on my floor. I'm pretty much never in my room, always hanging out down the hall. Probably planning on living with some of the same people again next year or two.
Ready to find your place, your people, and live wings up.